Hey, everybody, this is Joe Joseph, and this is the Daily Sheeple.com's Daily News Brief. And I have got a great piece to start off everybody tonight with, because, I mean, come on, at TDS, if there's one thing we pride ourselves on, it's a sense of humor. And this time, my good friend Melissa Dykes wrote a wonderful piece on the fact that the GOP now is whining that they don't want to repeal Obamacare. They actually do want to repeal it, but they don't want to stop taxing us for it. Because, of course, Obamacare led to one of the largest tax increases we've seen in quite some time. Anyway, Melissa writes, "Yeah, I said it. What a bunch of jerks. For what, at least 6 years straight now, the Republicans have been pissing and moaning about how much Obamacare sucks. Well, get in line. The majority of Americans who like their doctor and didn't get to keep him or her, and the rest of us who live in states where Obamacare has already imploded the private health insurance systems and made it impossible to afford what was supposed to be affordable medical care, feel the exact same way. Now with Obama on his way out the door and a president coming in who spends a lot of time talking about what a failed disaster it is, the GOP finally has their chance to do something about Obamacare. But guess what? They're hesitant. Why? Well, according to the Wall Street Journal and others, it's become increasingly apparent they're worried about cutting off all the revenue Obamacare's bringing in as a tax. You see, you remember back when the law was passed and then challenged in the Supreme Court, the reason why it was upheld was because it fell within what Chief Justice John Roberts said was the taxing ability of the United States government, that it was a tax. Now, Wall Street Journal writes, Republicans eager to scrap the 2010 healthcare law are wrestling with whether to immediately cut off the tax revenue it brings in. Among the thorniest issues GOP lawmakers face as they hash out how to try to dismantle the Affordable Care Act is that getting rid of the health law's taxes now would eliminate a major source of revenue that they would need to fund the 2 or 3 year transition period until a replacement plan is in place. And Melissa continues, she says they're even talking about repealing it immediately, but delaying that repeal for 3 years. Yeah. So, and that's how, politicians do it. That's how they do it. They'll say, yes, we're repealing it now, retroactive to, or whatever. They always use that lawyer speak. And who knows what they're going to replace it with. I do know that at one point in time, Trump was an advocate of single-payer health care. There is a bill lurking in Congress, the Medicare for All Act, H.R. 676. Now, if you read it, it's very interesting. And if you take a look at how they plan on funding it, people get up in arms first and foremost about single-payer health. What do we have now? We have an absolute, I don't know. It's a travesty what's happened to our healthcare system. It's greed run amok. Corporate greed at that. And that's not to say the government can do any better, because believe me, I'm not advocating for a single-payer health system. But according to H.R. 676, it would basically cost you as much as you're paying into your healthcare system now, only it'd be a tax instead, right? So if your employee contribution at work is, if you have a family, it's $600 a month, right? So you're going to be paying that tax anyway to the government, only you wouldn't be paying it as a premium to the health insurance companies. And then they would tax Wall Street transactions and a myriad of other things. But you wouldn't be paying that tax. And I don't know about FICA, but there's some FICA provisions in there as well. And I don't know what the solution is, but I can tell you that the status quo is no good. Obamacare is no good. Single payer, that's putting all of your eggs in the government basket. And I can't see or find a government program where the government didn't run it into the ground. I mean, look through history and tell me one program that they've run and just knocked it out of the park. You know, Social Security's bankrupt. Freddie Mae and or Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, garbage. All of their little plans and all of their little things that they do, they end up just totally and completely destroying. The road to hell is paved by good intentions. Yeah, but she said so after years of bitching, she says, about Obamacare, to look good for their constituents and get reelected, and that's how they're actually going to play it. Yes, we're going to repeal it immediately, but delay the implementation for 3 years. Yes. She says, because the dying middle class can really afford to sit around and continue to get bilked for thousands of dollars per family in BS, shared responsibility taxes for years over a purposefully failed law that's just going to get repealed to eventually institute socialist federal health care anyway, as it was always designed to do so. H.R. 676. She says, what a bunch of insert every cuss word I can think of and 3 more I just invented here. Absolutely right. It's an outrage. The problem is the government's not the solution. And I think that if we went back to going to insurance only for catastrophic care and people having to pay for your regular health care, what would happen is it would drive the cost way down. You would end up not paying as much. Or even co-ops. You know, start co-oping together, much like the insurance companies do anyway. I mean, these are all things that you can do in a private manner that doesn't get these corporations involved. And there's plenty of solutions out there. I don't know what's a good one. I'm certainly not a subject matter expert on healthcare or healthcare systems, let's say. Now, in other news, Trump, of course, now is backing a delay of Obamacare repeal. This, according to Zero Hedge, after pressure from none other than Rand Paul, of all people. It says, as we reported earlier today, while many items on the Trump agenda for both the first day and the rest of 2017 could take a substantial amount of time and effort before they're legislated and implemented, one thing that there was a virtual unanimous consensus on was that Trump would immediately launch the repeal of Obamacare, even if replacing the Affordable Care Law would take considerably longer, as it would require bipartisan support. However, it now appears that even prompt repeal of Obamacare is in question, as Trump has now backed waiting to repeal the Affordable Care Act until a replacement proposal is in hand, following a Friday night phone call with Rand Paul, the Kentucky Republican, said Monday, adding to momentum for changing GOP leaders' strategy on dismantling the 2010 health care law. Now, of course, Dr. Paul is an eye doctor by trade, but he has emerged as a vocal leader of a growing group of Republican senators expressing concerns with GOP's plans to vote to repeal the health care law early this year and then hammer out over weeks or months what would replace it after a 2 or 3 year transition. So it looks like Senator Paul has the ear of Donald Trump, and in a way that's a good thing, and in a way it's not, only because Rand Paul, certainly not Ron Paul. But, you know, he is his own man, and he's also seems to be quite friendly with Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, who I do not see eye to eye on. And, of course, is one of the major advocates to not repealing Obamacare. And I think it's simply because of the money. I mean, that's crazy. You know, at one point in time, it was the GOP that we used to say, hey, yeah, lower taxes, you know, less government. Whatever happened to that? Whatever happened to that? It's crazy. The Activist Post has a great piece by John Rappaport, The Op, as we're talking about government taking over things and really screwing things up. Unelected agents now infiltrating critical infrastructures. He's right. Of course, the DHS recently stepped in and called the voting system a critical infrastructure. Listen to this. It says, note to readers, the people in charge of Yes running the future are counting on a populace who can't think beyond a few weeks or months. That's their ace in the hole. The long-term future must always seem blurry and vague and a waste of time to consider. Why? Well, it's obvious. The people in charge are always building the long-term future brick by brick, and if very few citizens can actually grasp what it looks like, well, then how could they object or resist or even sound the alarm? If you want to illegally take over an area, you need to invent an external threat justifying the takeover. And of course, we've seen that exactly happen recently as Russia has been painted as a hostile force for trying to destroy our open democracy. And because Russia is so hostile towards our voting system, why, the Department of Homeland Security, my friends, is here to help. Because that's what they do. I'm from the government, and I'm here to help. They're now in charge of U.S. elections to combat Russian hackers. And it isn't only elections, my friends. In the release last Friday that gave control of the U.S. elections to DHS, listen to this. This is from ABC News. Quote, a 2013 presidential directive identified 16 sectors as critical infrastructures, including energy, financial services, healthcare, transportation, food and agriculture, and communications. The designation announced Friday places responsibility on DHS to identify and prioritize those sectors, considering physical and cyber threats against them. The secretary is also required to conduct security checks and provide information about emerging and imminent threats. Now, John Rappaport writes, he says, ABC got it wrong. The responsibilities, excluding elections, placed on the head of Homeland Security weren't invented last Friday. They kicked off in 2013, and they represent a technocratic op to infiltrate and exert power over every aspect of American life. The 2013 policy directive issued by President Obama was titled Critical Infrastructure Security and Review. It enumerated no less than 16 areas of so-called U.S. critical infrastructure where DHS would muscle in. Chemical, commercial facilities, communications, critical manufacturing, dams, defense industrial base, emergency services, energy, final services, food and agriculture, government facilities, healthcare and public health, information technology, nuclear reactors, material and waste, transportation systems, water and waste systems, and much, much more. That's right. These are the areas where DHS is expected to manage risks and strengthen security. And Homeland Security will also, of course, take charge of integrating and monitoring all the data networks of these 16 sectors. Why? Because they're doing it for your safety, my friends. And it's going to make you safer and happier if DHS is there, keeping you all warm and snuggly at night. Now, to the average person, it sounds kind of reasonable, but the true theme is control. John writes, planning, control, execution. Move in on those areas and exert operational command from the top. Right? Capturing the 16 areas and their data above was always the long-term aim when the DHS was invented in the wake of 9/11. If you recall, there was considerable grousing then about the word homeland because it emitted a strong whiff of fascism. I mean, come on. Everybody out there, didn't you think when Homeland Security, didn't that like strike you as quite kind of World War II Germany? Homeland, fatherland. I mean, come on. If the goal is engineering a new society, and of course it is, he writes, all systems of data collection, communication, and surveillance must be gathered under one roof. The social and political engineer, aka the technocrat, views every person or unit as a biological machine that must be profiled 6 ways from Sunday for the purpose of inserting him into an overall pattern. As Patrick Wood explained in his brilliant book, Technocracy Rising, quote, technology is being rapidly implemented to exhaustively monitor, measure, and control every facet of individual activity and every amp of energy delivered and consumed in the life of such individuals. This is what's going on, my friends. Slowly but surely, there's an op that's going on, unfolding right before our eyes, where our government is slowly but surely tightening the noose, and nobody's paying attention to it with all the distraction that's going on, all of the fake news distraction, all of the Obamacare distraction, all of that stuff is happening And slowly but surely, DHS is taking over all of these critical infrastructures and taking control of them. And this is a big problem because it's all for a boogeyman. It has no basis in fact. There's no credible threats. It is all boogeyman behavior. That's the way it is, you know. And if this boogeyman ain't going to cut it, they'll come up with another one. We've seen it time and time again. You know, the terrorism kind of played its course. It was done. So what do? Well, let's get Russia. Those pesky Russians are at it again. And then soon after, I guess we'll have another terrorist bombing, and we can go back and forth, like a ping pong game. Yes, because that's what we enjoy as Americans. We enjoy to be jerked around like this time and time again. That's what we do. We love it. We want more of it. My final argument, yeah, kind of like an argument, because I totally don't agree with this. SHGFplan.com. White philosophers next ban at college. Quote, a real danger of political correctness out of control. Absolutely. I got to tell you, you know, unless you're going to go to college to be a doctor or a lawyer or somebody that's making big bucks, engineering, and even then in engineering, you start out making $45,000 a year out of college now. If you can do that, college is the way to go. Any other way, forget it. The costs are out of control. And why would you want your children to be in that atmosphere? Just out of curiosity. I mean, why would you want them there? It encourages stupidity. And so Mac writes, rather ridiculous and ultimately quite dangerous. Apparently, there's no end to the stupidity, especially at centers of higher learning. In the quest for diversity, fair representation, and perhaps a little payback, some racially minded education reformers are now attempting to erase philosophers like Plato and Kant from the curriculum. Why? Because they're white. Never mind that these are some of the foundational minds, you know, that kind of explored knowledge as we know it, or the direction of Western society. You know what their problem was or is? They're white. According to RT, University of London students are demanding that thinkers such as Plato, Aristotle, Voltaire, and Kant be banned from the philosophy syllabus because they're white. Quote, white philosophers should be on the syllabus only, if required, and their work should be studied from a critical standpoint, the statement said, as cited by British media. It is everything that Martin Luther King, of course, didn't stand for, judging people by the color of their skin and not by the merit of their ideas. You know, how unbelievable, man. We have a holiday after Dr. King. Do you think anybody learns about him anymore? I wonder if public school curriculum has Dr. King in there and everything that he stood for, especially considering the narrative that's been spun and the divide and conquer utilizing race, especially over the last 8 years. It says, moreover, the bizarre campaign is essentially encouraging deliberate ignorance of some Western culture's most central figures, Plato, of course, being a key example. This, my friends, is nothing more than, again, the deliberate dumbing down of America. That's what it is. You're taking the people that can still afford to go to college and you're dumbing them down even further. Instead of being institutions of higher learning, which obviously they're not. Now, you know, we do away with Plato and Aristotle and Voltaire because they're white. It speaks to what you're paying $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year for. Must feel pretty proud to send your child to an educational institution like that. This was today's Daily News Brief brought to you by thedailysheeple.com. Check out this YouTube channel, subscribe to it today, and subscribe to our newsletter over at thedailysheeple.com. And I will see you all tomorrow. Have a good night, everyone.